Take number 2. Let's see it. No echo this time, so that's good. Start in the stream. Oh, no echolocation. No Blackstone ×3. Okay, we're good. I'm gonna wait for some people to pour in. Who just joined? We got a fun surprise for today. This is gonna be good. That's a mattress? Did you finally make the stream? Yes. Yes, Rosie, you did. And I'm hoping this is going to be a recording for later to post up on the channel. All right, I'm going to take one more sip of my water, and then I can get started. So, yeah, hydrate or dihydrate, exactly. Let's go ahead and get this started. So, biggest problem that I've noticed in the Enneagram community is that nobody knows how to type. Nobody knows how to type whatsoever. I'll see people being stuck in between like Enneagram 5 and Enneagram 9. Like actually two of the most different types that exist. I'll see people who are like the most well-tempered, disciplined, formally mannered, upright people, like insist that they're Enneagram 8. I'll see people who are obviously like these very mental characters insist that they're 2s. And overall, the Enneagram community is just a total mess because there's not even an ounce of consideration for how to type. And this occurred to me, I'm like, wait, where is the step-by-step typing method that people can use to get reliable results? It is like out there in the ether known by 3 people. So using both personal experience and the wisdom of several people who are smart at the Enneagram, I put together a 3-step basic idea for how typing is supposed to work. Get that mattress off of there. It's kind of like that. And I'll explain what this is in a moment, but this is crucial. Now the lighting is probably making it rather difficult to see, but this is how to learn Enneatyping. Yeah, how to type by Enneagram. The general rule goes like this. Starting with figuring out your triad, you know, head, heart, gut, most of you guys know that stuff. And then and this is a bit of a tricky one. It is using the knowledge of their fixation and their defense mechanism to figure out what their passion is. And a passion is the driving core of any Enneagram type. It is the thing that you are improperly motivated by. It's your corrupt motivation. And then number 3 is to put together this passion to figure out what instinct has been affected, and that's how you get your type. Now, there are other supplementary resources you can use to deduce your type, like reading Claudio Naranjo's books, specifically 27 Personalities in Search of Being. That's a great book. But I find that people have this really bad habit of reading a specific type, one of the 27 types, and then saying, bro, look at this paragraph. That's totally me. I'm a social 8, or I'm a self-preservation 6. That's totally me. And then they disregard the fact that they aren't part of the gut triad, and they don't have a fixation of rebellion, or they don't have the passion of lust, or etc., etc. And they entirely will disregard these huge picture things so that they can have their little, I'm like an E6. It's like, dude, you spend all your days getting attention from strangers online and hysterically going on about these stories that happened to you, getting your audience's reaction. You're not a 6. Cut it out. Yeah. Dracula says, how is that? Dracula? Yeah. Yo, I'm Alpha Mega Chat SP8 because I like things and stuff so real. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. You have people who are like, yeah, I'm a little rebellious and I'm confident in myself, and sometimes I fight with people. Yeah, I'm an E8. Bro took one look at his symptoms and decided that was his type. Okay, dude. Okay. Not how that works. So, I put this together to explain, like, the actual method for how you should type people. Instead of this weird wish fulfillment thing, like, don't do this. The wish fulfillment that people do is they'll read about a type, think it sounds cool, and then kind of backflip their way into justifying how they're that type. And when I say, well, you don't have the fixation of perfectionism. You can't be an Enneagram 1. I've never seen you fixate on perfectionism. I've seen you as a particularly action or gut-oriented character. That's not you at all. And they'll go, bro, read this description. That's totally me. But they've totally ignored the actually important things in Enneagram. So I'm going to very briefly explain this stuff because I have a get-together I want to get to, and I will make individual streams and videos for each of these methods so you guys actually know what you're doing. Shall we get started? Let's do it. So, there are 3. There's a triad, actually, of types. There's a triad of types. Head, heart, gut. A lot of you guys know this. The gut, or the action-oriented types, have an overinvestment of energy in corrective action. So they're going to act before they think. They're going to act before they feel, before they relate. I will now be able to defend myself when I say I'm E9. Hopefully. Maybe. Okay, so I would like to issue a statement about this. Human beings cannot self-type. They cannot self-type at all. You need someone else to look. I'm actually going to go on a rant here. So imagine you're this little human being, right? You have a head, you have these eyes, and look at you. You're just so content in who you are. And this is your field of vision. Pretty big. You got a pretty big field of vision, going up, going down. Your field of vision does not extend to yourself. There are things that every human does automatically that they take for granted that are totally unique. And so when people try to type themselves, the best they can do is look into a distorted reflection and be like, yeah, bro, that's me. You cannot type yourself. That's why I'm here. So that everyone, a group of 50 or so people, knows how to type everyone else, and then you can all type each other. That's what should be happening. If it is the height of arrogance to imagine that you can see yourself. This is why we need friends. This is why friends should be calling each other out. Because honestly, when we're doing something wrong, we're not aware of it. We don't mean to, and we need someone to lovingly point out where we're messing up. Yeah. So if we start out here with the triad, head, heart, gut. You have gut type being an orientation towards action. It's an overinvestment. You have an orientation towards relating, which is the heart, and an orientation towards comprehension, which is the schizoid type. Now, it's actually fairly simple to figure out what triad you're in. I would say this is the easiest step because, I'm about to blow your mind here, there are only 3 Enneagram types. Yeah. The other 6 are basically offshoots of those base 3. And then each one of those has 3 instincts, which are offshoots of the base type. A lot of people don't know this because they haven't read Claudio Naranjo. But I'll explain myself to you. Where's my purple? There it is. I like the color purple. If we go ahead, if you were to take a look, let's imagine we have the Enneagram circle right here. You'd have 8, 9, 1, and then you'd have 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. The types that really well and truly exist, so to say, are 9, 3, and 6. What do I mean by this? What do I mean? Because that's a confusing thing to say. Well, in the Enneagram, you'll see it arranged like 8, 9, 1, and then the next part of the circle is 2, 3, 4, and then the final part is 5, 6, 7. In the dead center of the geometry of these, 9, 3, and 6 stand out. Okay, well, why is that? Why do they stand out? Because they represent the very basic core of all neurotic behavior. The 9 represents the lack of self-awareness. 8, 9, and 1 are notoriously the least self-aware types. They don't know themselves even more than most of humanity. And in fact, they're so unaware of themselves that they tend to be very contented people who don't go to therapy. They're so ridiculously unconscious that they don't realize what's wrong with them. But the 9 is the center of it because it sacrifices even its own desires for just pure repetitive action. The 3 sacrifices itself and lives for the eyes of others. The 2 and the 4 do this as well, but they do it with a bit of a twist, a bit of a condition, if you will. We can explain that later. I do plan to make individual videos for each of the types. Then we have 5, 6, and 7. The 7 is, I know Naranjo says that the 5, I'm pretty sure the social 5 is the most intellectual type, but the Enneagram 6 is like the intellectual type that most resembles the mind triad problem. Well, what's their problem? Their problem is avoidance. These guys lack self-awareness. These guys lack, how do I say, self-sufficiency. Like, they're not contented in who they are, so they're constantly exaggerating themselves in the case of a 2, or making themselves to suffer, or changing their whole personality like the 3. There's a lack of sufficiency, and so they fake it to make it, basically. And then you have, or exaggerate, especially in the case of the 2 and the 4. And then you have the problem of the schizoids, which is the tendency to avoid or to run away. So, unconsciousness, craving, and avoidance. These are the 3 main things. And the 9 perfectly represents unconsciousness. The 3 perfectly represents craving. And the 6 perfectly represents avoidance. So the 9-3-6 combo should let you know what triad you're a part of. Essentially, once you learn 9, 3, and 6 as the types, you can very quickly discover what you're closest to. So if you find yourself, typed by another person, of course, because you can't do it yourself, very close to 9, 3, or 6, that's probably what triad you're in. And of course, there are other ways to find out what triad you're in, but I will break that down and make it its own independent episode. There's a couple of ways, but this general rule of 9-3-6 is what I prefer. So Stream saying, interesting. Would you say 9-3-6 would be the poster child? Yes. Yes, that's a great way to put it. Who is this? Little stress ball? Yeah, Little Stress Bulb just put it perfectly in the comments. 9, 3, and 6 would be the poster children of their respective categories. They are typical manifestations of neuroses, which is... I can't remember if I read this somewhere, but it's my belief that 9, 3, and 6 are the most common types. This is what pops up the most. So, after you discover your triad, believe me, I'd simplify that a lot. I'll have to go in depth later. The important thing to find is their fixation, which is kind of like a building used to house the passion, and a defense mechanism, which is a neurotic, repetitive behavior which protects the passion. So fixation enables it, defense mechanism protects it. Let's think of an example. Let's start with the Enneagram 2. I like Enneagram 2s. They're a lot of fun. They're deluded, as all Enneagram types are. If you have an Enneagram, it means you're deluded. Congrats. But they have the passion of pride. Well, now what's a passion? Well, passion is a perverse motivation. It's a perverse, internal, energetic motivation. It's kind of like when a little kid is motivated by a fear of punishment to obey his parents, when really the appropriate thing is he's motivated by his love of good. There are appropriate motivations and inappropriate motivations. And a passion is basically an inappropriate motivation that insinuates itself into your entire life, which is why it's important to discover it and then to get rid of it. That's like a huge deal. Okay, well, how do you discover it? This sounds really difficult because we can't see motivation, can we? We can guess it. So how do we guess it? Well, we guess it by taking a look at someone's fixation and defense mechanism. A fixation, the long and short of it, is that a fixation is a repeating behavior. Let's take the 2 for example, because I like examples and direct illustrations. The 2 has the perverse motivation of pride. They want to be a person of privilege. They want to be a person of importance, much like they were in their childhood. That's the whole thing, is that a 2 at some point in their life was deeply important and special and elevated above the rest, and they suffered a fall from grace. Maybe another sibling came along. Maybe their parents had a huge fight and couldn't pay attention to the kid anymore. Either way, the 2 gains a perverse motivation to regain that spot of importance. Well, how do they regain that spot of importance? How do they do that? Well, first, through the fixation of false abundance. The 2 is fixated on false abundance, meaning that they act out, because that's what a fixation is. It is an acting out of sorts. If you don't see someone acting out, you're not gonna be able to deduce their passion. So what they do is they act out a false abundance. They act out as though they have, I have unlimited time I can give to you. I'm so available. I'm so generous. I won't say no to you. I'll flatter you. They are helping. The 2s, they love to slurp. They're the helpers. And they're fixated on how abundant they are. And when you combine a false abundance with their defense mechanism of repression, where they essentially force themselves to become unaware of low down dirty things inside themselves. So it manifests differently depending on the subtype, but depending on the 2, they will repress and push down parts of themselves that would attack their pride. So their pride is, I'm important, I'm special, I deserve. And they repress feelings that make them feel not that way. So with the social 2, like losing his cool, losing his temper, losing control, well, that would defeat his pride of being oh so important and on top of the dominance hierarchy. So a social 2 might repress and chill and cool his emotions in order to protect, because the defense mechanism defends, it protects, his pride. So once you're able to see how this person goes on the defensive, so what's their defensive maneuver, and how they act out kind of like an attack. It's like attack and defense almost. The acting outward on the world, so the attack, and the working to protect themselves and deflect from other people, when you figure out their modes of attack and defense, you should be able to deduce their passion. And one fixation has one defense mechanism. So if you're like, oh, this, and I'm going to talk about Tuckbee here because she mistyped herself, obviously, but if you try and say that someone has a defense mechanism of like reaction formation, like with the Enneagram 1, which is essentially, oh, I'm a bad person, but let me act like a good person to deny my badness. And then you have the fixation of, what was it, perfectionism, where they're constantly needing to act to perfect the world. And then you apply that to someone who's obviously a sexual 6. It's like, that's not going to work. You're going to find someone who's, oh, you know, they're so perfectionistic, but then you don't find their reaction formation. Ever. Because some of these... that's when you should start over, really, is if you can't mix the fixation and the defense mechanism, that's when you need to start back from square one. This is selfish, but could you explain the specific fixation and defense mechanisms are? I can. Yeah, of the E1 defense mechanism is reaction formation. So it is acting in the opposite way according to your instincts. Okay, I'll clarify reaction formation. It is, let's say, okay, here's an illustrative example. Have you ever watched The Hunchback of Notre Dame? Count Frollo is an Enneagram 1, and he has this lustful desire for Esmeralda. And he's fighting with himself because Enneagram 1s all fight with their instincts because they believe that unmitigated emotions and unmitigated, unfiltered instincts are bad. So they filter, here's what it is, reaction formation. They filter their instinct through code, through their own sense of right and wrong, and they produce a new reaction. So instead of that natural desire to curse at someone and say, you dumbass, you're completely wrong, instead, they're going to filter it through what they believe is moral. And then they're going to act in a little bit of a different way. I've literally been on record saying my impulses and I are in constant war with each other and the impulses always win. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good piece of information to keep that in mind. Is the repression why they have a passion of anger? Good question. So the passion of anger, there's a couple of different backstories that go into the Enneagram 1, but the reason anger exists is because I remember this in the social subtype for the Enneagram 1 at least, is that they were tasked with taking care of their parents. If you want a type that was parentified, Enneagram 1 was parentified. Or they were forced to grow up too quickly. They were forced to renounce instinctiveness, renounce playfulness, and they had to become an adult. Yeah, why are the gut types said to be angry? That's actually a common misconception. That is a very common misconception because the Enneagram 1 is not angry in the sense of emotions. They are angry in the sense of dissatisfaction. The Enneagram 1 is dissatisfied with the way things are. They have a passion for it. They are motivated by dissatisfaction. So they protect, or rather they enact, I should say, they enact their dissatisfaction, their frustration, with perfectionism. That's why they're so nitpicky, and that's why their jobs take forever to do, is because they're insistent on getting every last detail right. Their fixation is enabling their anger. It's not necessarily emotional anger, although sexual ones can seem emotionally angry. But now little meanies. Yeah, the idea that gut types are anger types is a misconception. It's weird because Riso and Hudson, people who are kind of taking stuff from Claudio Naranjo, totally misunderstood what anger was, and oh gosh. I don't know how to explain my impulsiveness in the E1 context. How can the most E8 trait manifest so thoroughly through me? It could be a sexual one. I'm not covering specific type stuff right now. That will be coming along in later live streams. But the sexual one does look like an E8 a lot of the time. So there are explanations for this, and they will come. Moralized his anger at his father and God into a search for psychological truth. Yeah, exactly. E1s are going to moralize to hell and back. And I'll explain the specifics here at a later time. I mean, it's what I do, but I have a lot of things to get to. So let's move on from this. These will all get their own individual videos. I'll actually take what am I talking about? A picture of this before I'm done. Then we have step number 3, which is to take the deduced passion with the instinct being interfered with. That's what Enneagram is. You're being interfered with. Your normal flow of life is being disrupted. because of your passion. And your passion is invading either your conservation instinct, I call it the self instinct, the inner instinct, the social instinct, or the intellectual instinct, and then the sexual, I prefer to call it the obsessive instinct, because they're all obsessive. And when you're able to figure that out, generally, you're going to figure out what your type is. I give it 80% accuracy. Yeah, all this will be explained in more detail, but this is launched in criticism against how people typically type themselves, which is by randomly flipping through blog posts and articles, finding a paragraph that they agree with, and then basing their personality off of type. And what they end up doing is reading about a type, identifying with it, figuring out how they're in the triad, and then learning about passions and fixations. And that's like totally not the way to do it. Obsessiveness, yeah, Enneagram 1 is the obsessive type. They're the most obsessive compulsive type. In fact, the way that their lives get interfered with the most is they just can't allow things to just be. They need to act on the world and make it better. It needs to be improved, and I'm the one who can improve it. They are truly proud characters. So anyway, if we have any questions before I go, that's the long and short of it. I don't want to take too long here. Yeah, exactly. They think that E7 is planning and thinking and impulsivity and lack of thought just because Riso and Hudson said so. Yeah, if anyone thinks, it's the Enneagram 7. Enneagram 7s are masterful thinkers, and they just won't stop. Not exactly deep thinkers, but definitely wide thinkers. I could see Jack being an E1. He was parentified and he often represses himself. Oh, you're that Rose! Dude! Dude, my boy Jack! Ah, I miss Jack. What a guy. I've always liked him. It's not like I think I'm the only one who can fix the world. It's more like no one else will do it. That's also a part of it. No one else will do it. Only I could do it. No one else is willing to do what I'm willing to do. Tough stuff. All right. I think that's a good place to stop. I will return to this later, because I do think that talking about what's wrong with people is important so that they can get to the point, and myself too, they can get to the point where this stops being a problem. The whole point of Enneagram is that we don't need it anymore. The whole point of this is that one day we should never touch it again. It's like a doctor. You don't stay in the hospital. If you like your Enneagram, that's going to be a problem. Anyways, I'm going to take my leave. Y'all have a good rest of your day. God bless.